Today for Full Album Friday, we're going back to 1966 to look at the classic Pet Sounds record from the Beach Boys. First off, I know that I reviewed this many years ago, but there's been a very loud cry from people for me to do it again because that was way early on in the Daily Guru. It really wasn't done as well, and this record is certainly worth revisiting. So let's dig back in and look at exactly why this record remains so highly revered after nearly 5 decades. First off, know that this record was a massive inspiration and influence when the Beatles were recording their Sgt. Pepper's album. And if you listen to them both, there are a ton of similarities going on. But let's not overlook the fact that Brian Wilson has also stated that he took a ton of influence for this record from the Beatles' Rubber Soul. It's a really interesting musical cycle. And now that I think about it, I kind of want to listen to all 4 records in progression because that's kind of the development of popular rock-based psychedelic music. But let's get back to Pet Sounds before I go off on that musical tangent. It'll be a lot of fun and I highly recommend doing it. I mean, the opening notes on this album, they're nothing short of ethereal. They're some of my favorite opening notes ever. Those opening notes, which happen to be the opening notes of the song Wouldn't It Be Nice, are about as iconic as it gets. It's got that gorgeous pop feeling like nothing else since, and it sets an amazing tone for this album. One of the keys to Pet Sounds is the fact that every song just melts wonderfully into the next track. And along with being musically breathtaking, the moods on this album run just as deep, and you can really make the case that this record is all about mood almost more than it is about music. I mean, there's something like 65 people who contributed musically to this album. And there's everything from traditional instruments to bike horns and soda cans and all sorts of other sounds on this album. There's lots of sonic experimentation going on here, and it's really cool. The fact of the matter is, on Pet Sounds, there were no creative musical limits, and that makes for an amazing album. But the key is that that's always done without losing melody or pop sensibility at all. And that, well, let's be honest, that's kind of the genius of Brian Wilson and why this record is such a touchstone all these years later. I mean, of course, then we have the vocals. You're talking about the Beach Boys here, who did harmonies like nobody else in history. This is the blueprint for harmonic singing. There's nobody else in the history of pop music that's even come close to these sort of harmonies. Every single note they sing just soars, and there aren't many people who are gonna say, yeah, those guys couldn't sing. This is what it's all about. You pretty much have to sing along with every single song, and these are the sort of tracks that really just lift your spirits whether you want to or not. Whether it's a slow, lonely, beachy type love song or something that's just gonna make you feel good, Pet Sounds has it in excess. And this album's really a vocal masterclass that's never been equaled. But even beyond that, it's the way that the vocals fit in so seamlessly with the musical orchestrations that really make these songs fly. And that combination, of course, leads us to the production, because not many people will argue this just might be the most perfectly produced album ever. There isn't a note or a beat out of place, and the way that everything swirls together so wonderfully, this is what perfect production is all about. I mean, if you're wondering why sometimes I go on about the mix being slightly off or things in the music needing to be in different places, it's probably because I'm comparing it to Pet Sounds. Everything on this album is exactly where it needs to be at exactly the right level. That's what you're supposed to do as an engineer or a producer. Honestly, Pet Sounds is just an album in its own musical universe, and for good reason. It does everything right and does it all in massive amounts. And it's a cornerstone for music from both a creative and a production standpoint. Everything here is exactly what you want. And if somehow Pet Sounds doesn't have a very prominent place in your collection, you need to get your brain fixed and change that right now. Thank me later.